Howdy, everybody.
Hello,
Good
hello.
afternoon.
All right, I think we have mostly everybody here, so we can probably go ahead and get started. I dropped the notes link in the chat if everyone wants to go and add themselves to the attendee list, please. And I'll kick us off by reading our script. So, hello everyone. This is just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to LFX and YouTube shortly after. Your participation in these meetings is an agreement to abide by the Cloud Native Code of Conduct, which can be found in the TOC repo, I believe. And I need at least one person to volunteer as scribe to ensure all actions and primary content discussed is recorded and written in the notes. Does anyone want to volunteer to scribe? If not, I think Evan will be a couple minutes late, and I'm sure he would.
I'll help script.
Thank you. All right. Is there any new members or anyone new to the call or someone who simply wants to reintroduce themselves? Want to just quickly give an introduction? All right. So I don't believe we have a community demo today. Let me double check. No, not for the 3rd. Is there any spontaneous demo or topic of discussion that you guys want to bring up to fill that slot? Or do you want to just move over to the next topic? I'll give it a minute to see if anyone has any ideas.
Mike has something new every week. He should
Oh.
just be the standing default
Well,
for demo.
Do
I
you want
mean,
to? Yeah.
I did just show it off in in the previous meeting a few minutes ago. I'm happy to kind of show it off a second time.
I have no idea what it
Uh,
is. Do it, please.
Yeah, I don't either, so
um,
I'd love to see it.
so I won't do the whole spiel because I think some folks have seen Eddie I know has seen Darn It prior to this. But one of the things was while doing the recent OpenSSF baseline audits for Guac and Salsa and some other tools, I was like, oh, hey, maybe I should look at fixing some of these things myself. And I found that at least the original thing for Darn It, that again, it's an open source project. It's up on the Kusari side of things. But one of the things I recognized was actually building out a lot of the YAML config was really, really annoying. Um, and I realized like, oh, actually, a lot of folks are probably not going to want to build out this YAML config themselves and do a lot of stuff that way. So I started to rewrite Darn It, some of the underlying code for Darn It to focus more as like almost like an MCP server. And so one of the things I did was here, hold on. Um, here. Uh, let me go and find, I don't know, a random project here. Um, give me 1 second. Uh, here. So I haven't run this on this, but I will. Uh, Here, let me just. Where did this go? Okay, let me share this. So there's a couple of things this thing can do here. So like, if I do, so like, can you run OSPS baseline on this and generate some? Can you check baseline clients on this and generate a signed attestation? And it takes a couple of minutes here. And again, it's done in done in a way that is also extensible. So pretty much at a high level, what it does, similar to sort of the other design for, it still follows the design for Darn It, just different code, um, is it runs various checks. In this case, the checks are a combination of some stuff that is, ooh, it already finished already. But the basic, so at the very high level is like it orchestrates a lot of these things, but it itself does not really do any of these checks. It shouldn't be doing these checks themselves. It should be, reaching out to Privateer and Scorecard and various other tools. And so, for example, here's all the things that are missing, and here, um, so there's various things that are missing on this project. Um, and I can just, and one of the things that it'll begin to do is it will also now go out and call other tools for actually remediating these issues. Now, the actual things that I'm doing are, I actually wrote the logic for a lot of these things. So it's like, here's a default security.md, just fill in the blanks. And let me also, while that's running, let me share a different tab here in a second. Let me share. Yeah, so let me share this tab. And so while it's doing this, it generates a, oops, oh my gosh, how do I get this annotation thing to, it's, oh, there we go. Nope. Sorry, Zoom is being weird with cat project.toml. So uh, one of the things, oh, it actually did it completely wrong here. Yeah, but so one of the things that it does is it generates a project configuration file, which again, this is going to be similar to Security Insights or whatever. And I'm talking to Bob and Jiffy from CNCF. I know they're working on a dot project, but the idea, right, would be what if long term you put a lot of the things about where all these things live and whatever in files that live under some directory in your repo. So if anybody ever needs to go somewhere, they know exactly where to look. And anyway, so all this sort of stuff keeps happening. And then behind the scenes, if I go back and share this again, back to here, and it'll generate like a contributing.md, blah, blah. But all of this sort of stuff is even though it's using the LLM, as much as the LLM can be pulled out of the equation, the better. Like, oh, here's a template. And all we do is we take the information from your security insights, your project files, whatever, and then just sort of plug it in where it needs to go. And then you don't have to worry about anything else there. And it also and it generates also an attestation as well.
What if I don't know for sure I want to follow baseline? Maybe I have some different set of regulations I care about, or just
Sure.
like some other constraints. Can it also just sort of capture what I'm doing in a reasonable way?
Yeah, so it still needs to be, so this is where I need to do a little bit more work on this. But the basic idea is it it's more of like a framework, and it just so happens that the right now default implementation I've built is for baseline. But if you have anything else, it's essentially just a set of configuration for I run these checks, and based on these things failing or passing or whatever, here's the data I capture about them. And then here is the things I run to then fix those issues. And the LLM comes in where it's like, okay, well, if I have this data and let's say I know I need to take the name of the project and fill it in for name of project here, and it kind of handles that mapping. And the thing that you can do with this tool, given that it is set up in such a way, is you can have it orchestrate just purely the checks and say, hey, I want to generate these checks. I want to run these checks, and I want you to generate me a report, an attestation, whatever. And again, you have to define the attestation if it's like something that's its own thing. But there's lots of different options there. And again, not everything has been implemented right now. I still have the reason one of the reasons why I haven't actually made this bit of the code open source yet is that it's a bit of a mess and I need to disentangle some of the bits. But the idea behind it in the future is to, or in the near future, is to make it very much a framework that is focused on this. So it's like, hey, I take these things, map them to these things, and then run these remediations.
What if instead I want to know, like, have I correctly captured something like my configuration? So for instance, like I want to do a build and I want to make sure that I'm doing this, I can build in a clean environment. I want to make sure that when I test, my tests all still work in a clean environment. And I want to make sure that I have a way to bootstrap from basically nothing to get there. Does that also make sense in this framework?
Can you repeat that one more time? Maybe.
So yeah, like one of the best practices that in general in software engineering is you make sure that you can build, like if let's say you have some system that's running your tests or is your build environment. You may also want that configuration for how to set that up to
Oh,
always to be able to build that configuration and never retain things like, for instance, some file that was created during a prior test run should not carry over into the future tests. And so, like, one way to do this is you clobber everything and do effectively like a fresh setup of everything all the time. So I'm curious, like, if you could envision this being used or handle a situation where I have some environment and you're going to guess how I did the setup. And then you're going to try to do it and see if the tests run, see if you can build.
yeah. Yeah, so on that end, the answer is yeah. Like the ideally it tries to do its best at ensuring that like so that's kind of where that whether it's security insights or project or some sort of project definition would help out with some of this to sort of check for those like I don't know, I guess you would call them almost like uh, so are you saying like the idea here is to make sure that the assumptions are still correct or
You might make some inference about how to build my software. Like, for instance,
yes.
I say, hey, this thing runs. Like, you can see it, you can run it right now, and it works. And then the question is that do I have a set of instructions? Can you automatically generate a set of instructions that Brant could take? I'm just going to call Brant's name out because I see he has his camera on. That Brant could take and run a script on his system where he would entirely clone everything he needed to run the same tests in his environment and be able to have them pass, or if they fail, they fail
Mm.
because he's using Windows and I'm using a Mac.
So yeah, I think there's certain things that can be done there. I think it when it comes to uh I think the challenge when it comes to like there's going to be certain things that you can infer and I think the issue has more to do with the big challenge has more to do with the n numbers of ways that this could all tease out when looking at somebody's build than it has to do with an individual build itself, if that makes sense. Like the challenge I think I found with, hey, yeah, he's running on Windows, but how was I supposed to know? Or, oh, I didn't realize you're actually calling the right security command, but it's in a make file super deep somewhere. And it's not being called from your build.sh or whatever. So I think that's kind of where a lot of the challenges come in is like it, and this is actually the biggest challenge with something like Darnit. And one of the reasons why I started switching a bit more to the LLM to have it kind of do that sort of level of introspection is when you have this whole collection of things where some people have monorepos, some people have micro repos, some people build via um, a massive some people have massive build files of like make files or whatever. Some people have very simple, like I run go build. And if I'm running go build, it's going to be a little bit simpler than if I need to go and like do deep introspection of your make file to understand if you actually called the right compiler flag. Does that sort of answer what you're talking about there, Justin?
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think that's kind of where I found, again, LLMs are not perfect, but I think the thing that I found is that having an LLM do the like dirty work of, hey, I've told it to look to see if I'm using these flags. And like, if you don't, don't tell it, like the thing I found, at least in building out this framework, is having the MCP server and having the LLM say, hey, tell me if I'm using secure security flags is a bad idea. But saying, am I using this set of security flags? And check these various files just to make sure. It's much better doing it that way than doing the first one of just saying, figure out security for me. But it's more like, I know good security. I should be looking for all these things, but I have hundreds of files I need to potentially look through to understand exactly which set of files all connect to the build, that it's much better at. Again, that's just anecdotal. I don't have like a study or anything like that, but anecdotally, I found it to be much more effective when doing that sort of thing. So if you can tell it, for example, hey, if you're building on Windows, look for these flags. If you're building on Linux, look for these flags, blah, blah. And it can then sort of do some of that. And then the other thing that you also in the framework need to tease out is really push the MCP and in the prompting of like, don't make assumptions. Trigger to the end user if you don't know something, which again is the way you would tell almost like any engineer is like, hey, if you're not super familiar, ask the maintainer of the project. Hey, as far as I could tell, it doesn't look like you're using this flag. Can you double check? And the maintainer might be like, oh, no, actually I do use that flag, but it's buried over here. But again, already that sort of thing helps like, take something that took, a couple of hours to, let's say, investigate and now makes it 5 minutes.
So, Mike, I'm actually building or in the process of building a Jamara MCP server. And I think that it would be, once you do open source this, it would be cool to see how these could be complementary. And it actually goes to like Justin's question where I could define a set of security controls and then my policy on top of that. So maybe I don't want to do a remediation. Maybe I want you to open a Jira issue or send me a Slack message. So I might have maybe a Jamara MCP server creating that policy, modifying that policy, passing it that type of information to this tool so it can act upon that. So that made me think of it.
Yeah. And that the thing I've heard, again, this is also just reading through, I'm not an AI expert yet, but I'm trying to get there, the way the world's moving. Is the thing I've been told is, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to have multiple MCP servers that all interact with each other. And so, for example, this specific one, the idea also behind the scenes is you can have it call various tools, but I could also tell it to interact with other MCP servers in various ways to say, hey, run this MCP server to tell me what my policy is for security, and then map that to, these sets of checks, and then call some other MCP server and yada, yada, and then have it interact in various ways to then, yeah, and I'm super happy to see how they would all interact and so on. I know one of the big things right now that's still not super well defined is how MCP servers are supposed to like what is the communication protocol? Like what's the way to make sure that they it's very easy to have two MCP servers essentially confuse each other. I found, but it's something that I'm sure we'll work through and but yeah, definitely happy to work with you on that.
Cool. All right. Any other questions or comments before we move to the next thing on the agenda?
I think I've seen as well that you can use the MCP tool descriptions to potentially contaminate other MCP tool invocations.
Sure.
Has there been any progress on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of a. Oh, sorry, go, Justin.
There's a bunch of security work that's looking at different ways of doing this, but yeah, this is like one of probably 30 different attack vectors that exist in this space. Frederick Kautz has put a nice model of this together for people that are interested. And there's mitigations for a lot of these that are effective.
I'm a tool that you should run after getting the security guards before you actually implement any of them. Attack was. I was like, wow, someone was evil and clever there.
All right, I think we might be ready to move on. I don't think there was an APAC meeting since the last iteration of this meeting.
Yeah, no, that's this evening.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who spoke.
Oh no, the APAC meeting is this evening.
Oh, okay.
This week.
Thank you. The TOC meeting. Does someone who attended the TOC meeting, I believe it was yesterday, want to give us an update? Brant, would you attend that one?
I did. As far as the TOC meeting went, I believe we covered like two primary topics, the latter being documentation. And so if you visited contribute.cncf.io, I believe that's where all the documentation is currently being located or relocated for all the tags and initiatives and other things. And so that's still a work in progress. Basically, they're kicking off a big documentation, statement of work, and we'll see how that evolves. I've got some action items of my own to follow up on there. And then before that, we went through and discussed all of the open initiatives. And so it was mainly just a revisit of what open initiatives are there. Have we found any gotchas with regards to how we make them discoverable? Some of them managing the fact that there are multiple different boards that initiatives show up on, and you have to manage the status of each of those individually on each board. So a little bit of overhead there to go through, but besides that, it was mainly just a call out which ones are being actively worked for the people present, provide a status update, and for our side of the house, John Shell largely provided the tax security and compliance updates, and I believe that was a majority of the discussion.
Sounds good. So curious about the tag security website and the source code for that. Should we continue to add there until the migration happens? Was that the guidance that we got? I wasn't sure about like the timeline of the migration and when we should start contributing somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say we're probably in the boat where, if at all possible, let's try to start navigating to the new location. And I can go and find that here shortly. Primarily because for Bob and others, they already went through and migrated a lot of the core content. And so it already exists over there. Yep. A lot of the migration has already happened. If there are things being merged into the old repository, we might want to keep an eye on that and just kind of audit that accordingly, and or probably establish something on a top banner on our repository that says, hey, this is being archived in the near future. Let's work on updating the documentation in the new source of truth.
Yeah, I think a few folks at KubeCon got confused about that, including myself, when I was trying to kind of, hey, that white paper that we released last year, oh, well, it's still under this repo, but we're going to be moving everything to this. So, yeah, there was some confusion there.
Do we know Who is responsible for migrating that?
I asked some questions, and now I am the liaison for tag security and compliance.
Well, so you said liaison. So that suggests, is this CNCF staff that are moving it, or is this please find somebody in the tag to move it?
So largely the migration has already been done. There are some gotchas in there that are some of the content was moved to more broader applicability locations. So for something like some of the security guidance, that's not only tag security anymore, that's more broadly project security guidance. So things have kind of moved around. I think it's the current action item is for each tag to go and audit. Is there any content that is missing or otherwise misplaced? And in doing so, I think we, as the tag contributors and maintainers, can go and also add additional items or move things as necessary.
Yeah, I was wondering about specifically some of the like the supply chain compromises catalog. I feel like didn't get moved over.
I believe it did. If we look, I'm going to paste a link really quick of this one here in the chat. But that is also to say that yes, there may be content that was migrated, but is it in its entirety? Is there something missing? That should all definitely be audited.
Any more questions on the TOC meeting? All right, looks like we're moving on to project updates. Evan, did you want to talk about the supply chain insights project?
Sure. Also lower my hand. So I am trying to get the supply chain insight project to come to some kind of termination, probably around the end of January or so. The current status is that we built a bunch of tools with the idea that we'd feed SBOMs in, and then discovered we didn't have many SBOMs to feed in. And so I suspect that barring some breakthrough on finding SBOMs, a lot of what our output will be is, hey, projects should publish SBOMs in one of these, one of these three ways, depending on what kind of output you're producing, so that we can do this more successfully in the future. Mike, you see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, have you spoken to Mario at all?
A little bit.
So he has underneath, give me 1 second here just to pull this up. Under this repo and this branch, which I'll post here, and then I'll also include in the notes in a second. Oh no, where did this go? Here we go. So he himself also had the same issue, and he's doing it on behalf of CNCF itself, because CNCF needs to essentially do legal license sort of stuff.
Yep.
on an ongoing basis. And it turns out, yeah, most of the projects are not generating S-bombs. There's
Actually,
obviously,
Matt Young went in and looked at all the CI and found that there were a large number of CI jobs that referenced S-bombs, but they weren't getting published anywhere that you could find them.
yeah, um, yeah, that's also another issue, which I think is kind of funny, is people are generating S-bombs but not actually doing anything with them. Um, so one of the things that he was starting to do was he's starting to create some automation to generate S-bombs for some of this. I think obviously the best long-term solution is actually to get projects to generate their own S-bombs, and publish them in some way so that it becomes easier to then say, oh, all these projects are all publishing S-bombs to a well-known location or through something that could be easily discovered. And then we can then ingest all those things to then do stuff with. And I think hopefully with stuff like baseline and some of these other things that are kind of coming, it's like, hey, if you're doing releases, you really should be generating S-bombs. If you're generating S-bombs, here's the canonical place to publish them to. Yeah.
Yes.
Or do something that like, hey, I publish a, catalog file, and that catalog file talks about all my output artifacts or whatever it may be. But I think some of that's going to take some time. And for what's worth, this is the thing that I think like which frustrates me to no end about the supply chain problem, is how much of it is like, it's not the technical piece, it's getting everybody to just come together and make a decision on like, where should these things live. That's kind of the big issue.
It's a last mile problem. Yeah.
Yeah. But Mario's also looking at this. I know CNCF.
We talked a little bit at KubeCon, but it sounds like it's also been diverted into some other stuff.
Yep. All right. Well,
so the fact that
that's the end of my rant.
The fact that it's medium priority for everyone also means that it never gets done. But yeah, so that's the status of supply chain insights. Brent?
I don't want to take us off target, but I think a quick question is like, how do we solve that problem? And maybe not the how, but like the when. I feel like this is a pretty key problem to solve. And is anybody working on it? And if not, should we put that somewhere?
A bunch of people are working on it. I mean, I think part of the problem is that a bunch of people are working on it with different ideas. Michael?
So I do think CNCF staff is also, they're planning to work on this through their like .project initiative. And so I've been sending just my thoughts to Giphy on this, which is just like, and again, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole, because I think we could be here for, I have thoughts on like, hey, we could abuse DNS to point to the correct places where all of your releases are, whatever it may be, right? I think there's lots of different ways to do that, but I think and I think the challenge that the big challenge that I think we have with this problem, and is the same thing I spoke about in the last meeting, and I'll speak about probably in the next meeting, is like every single project at some level is in fact a special snowflake, right? Like you have projects that are mono repos. You have projects that are actually, their projects are split up into 12 different repos. Like look at Kubernetes. Kubernetes is something like 60 sub projects or something. It's something, there's a whole lot of stuff there, and you're like, well, where do and their S-bombs are hidden. And in addition to that, for a lot of those sub projects, they don't have S-bombs for the tools they use to build Kubernetes. So it's like you built this tool that helps you build Kubernetes, but that doesn't have an S-bomb itself, which it probably should, given that like if that tool has a bunch of vulnerabilities and that's being used to then build the thing that, it's all, it's turtles all the way down, as they say, right? So I think the challenge I have, the challenge that often comes up here is, yeah, if you have a very simple Go project, you can generate an SBOM in 2 seconds, right? And again, it might not be perfect. It's not necessarily SBOM it. It's not blah, 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 but it's something. The challenge is that once you start to go and say, oh, well, this is a monorepo. Well, how do I tell, who do I tell that like, actually this monorepo, we have 6 different flavors of release based on this monorepo. And so really it's not just one SBOM that I release for every release. It's actually 20 SBOMs or whatever it may be. Like it's actually a whole bunch of different stuff. And how do I tell my downstream consumers, yeah, you're actually, if you look at this file, it's this SBOM. If you look at that file, it's this SBOM. If you look at this release, it's this, it becomes this kind of thing of like, to just, not like be hyperbolic, but it's like, we can't even define what software counts as. So how can we define where an where the bill of material, what actually is the bill of materials? So I think that itself is a bit of the challenge, and I think that's where folks like Gphy are trying to explore this idea of, well, if we have a project file that or project directory where we can keep a bunch of this information, stuff like security insights will live there, and a bunch of these other things will all sort of like live there. It might make discovery of those things a bit easier, so that we can have an automated tool say, oh, okay, well, if I just am looking for this thing, I just need to pull this SBOM because I looked at this file that's in a well-known location. And but yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next one? All right. Any updates on security assessments?
Yes. So I've looked over a couple of different self-assessments and got those merged along. We're also supposedly in the bowels of the Kyverno assessment. But like, frankly, I think that as far as I can tell, that's stalled, and I'm possibly going to have to take the baton out of Andy Martin's hand quite soon if he doesn't kind of like get a little bit of energy. Maybe there's something else going on. There's the Kyverno. Yeah. So okay. So basically, the way that the assessment process usually goes is that they fill out a document, and then the security assessment lead from our side goes through that document in a careful way to basically get them to make sure their writing is precise and understandable to others. Okay. And then after that, we go through and we do an assessment of the process, like all the reviewers and other people go through. But this stops, like the reason to do that first is to make sure that the document should be able to be understood by a human who isn't the person who wrote it and isn't like, and a different maintainer of the project than the person who wrote it. And that process hasn't really been done. And so what happened last week was a little bit of like, just like, hey, let's talk through things and try to tell you what we think and stuff like this, and wasn't really the way we do our assessments. So I don't really know what we're doing at this point, kind of, but I talked with Andy a little bit and tried to kind of reset and get us back to the normal way we do assessments. And I don't know. I think he might have just had other things come up, because he seemed quite interested and receptive and like he was going to dive in, but I haven't seen anything. So if anyone happens to bump into him, maybe just chat with him about as he planning on moving this along. I think the Kyverno folks, now that they have their application in for progressing to the next level in the CNCF, they also may feel like they will lose that momentum if we don't act soon, I think, to get things together. So I would, if need be, I'll step in, or would encourage someone else to step in as a lead reviewer if Andy's too busy. Oh, and on the other side of this, the TOC, like apparently after I review and one of the chairs reviews, we can't merge self-assessments anymore for some reason, even after we've approved. I don't get it. So the TOC, apparently someone there needs to approve, and we should fix that so that's not the case.
That's probably something in the GitHub owners stuff. I can take a look at that.
All right, thanks, Justin. Thanks, Evan. Up next is security controls, which I think is, I'll give an update there. I scheduled the first meeting for the Cloud Native Security Controls Refresh Initiative for December 12th. So that's a Friday, and it's in the afternoon Eastern time. I put it on the Tag Security and Compliance public calendar and linked it in the Slack channel. And right now, what I'm trying to do kind of in a more asynchronous way, since I think we have a pretty wide gap in who wants to participate time zone wise, is create that initial initiative README, similar to the Supply Chain Insights README, where we get consensus on scope and develop specific milestones. I'm hoping to keep them really small and achievable and have a checkpoint at the end, essentially a question to answer to let us know if we should keep moving forward, where I think those would be good opportunities to get feedback from the TOC. So that's where we are. And if anyone's interested in that README, I can go grab it. But right now I'm just doing it in a Google Doc to make it easier to collaborate before we put in the TOC repo. All right, and the MCP initiative. I know John's not here. Is anyone else participating in that who can give an update? Go ahead, Evan.
I did a small amount of participation. I can't give a full update, but it looked like they were looking to end up producing at least 2 documents, one of which was a white paper aimed at architects for MCP system, MCP servers, and I forget which way is server and which way is client, but the MCP stuff that is hosted out in the cloud. And the other was some sort of implementation best practice guidelines. And I encourage them to consider their naming for that carefully, because I suspect that it might not be in a white papery format. If you follow where the notion of white papers came from, they were intended to change the minds of people deciding and implementing policy in the very broad sense of policy, not the very fine-grained sense that Kyverno, for example, is talking about. And so describing it as a white paper, but not aiming it at the people who have the ability to change policy might be part of the problem that we've seen with white papers going up to the COC so far.
All right, thanks, Evan. Does anyone have questions on that or comments?
You can also tell me I'm full of it. I'm okay with that.
Cool. I don't think anyone thinks you're full of it. No one said anything. So. All right. Security Slam. I see that on here.
We do have folks from OpenSSF that are asking for more visibility on that. So we need to kind of capitalize on that. But I think it's mostly up to me and Marina. Marina was trying to figure out something with the CNCF staff last I checked. But we might want to take advantage of the lead session later today to just hold ourselves accountable to moving that forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Eddie. Next item on the list is triaging current issues. And I already took a look at the link and I didn't see any new issues or initiatives on our project board to look at. So I think we can skip that one. And then we can do general stand up and check in from partner groups. Does anyone have updates there? All right. Schedule the next community demo. I'm actually on the schedule for the next community demo, so I don't think we need to do that. And then I think Evan is next after that, and then we don't have any until next year, right?
I actually have a slight revision to that. We've got Justin and William Woodruff to do a debate on holding back dependency updates on the 17th. So
okay.
I'm moving the Minder demo to January.
Okay.
Because no one objected to the idea of canceling the meetings the day before Christmas and the day before New Year's.
Cool. That's actually a good update that I didn't say, that we're going to cancel those meetings. So
I just figured I'd
yeah.
flip it in.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
You got to the end.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think we have any more topics, but I'll pause for a second, see if anyone has any last things they want to bring up. With 5 minutes to spare.
Thanks for hosting, Jen.
Yep. Thank you. See everybody later.
Bye. See you.